The spoon trembled slightly as I lifted another portion of chicken soup to Mrs. Miller's lips. My pharmacology textbook balanced precariously on my knee. Steam rose between us in the dim afternoon light filtering through her bedroom curtains, creating an almost sacred intimacy that had become our daily ritual. "You're burning yourself out again, sweetheart," Mrs. Miller whispered, her weathered hand covering mine. "David doesn't deserve this kind of devotion." I forced a smile, the same practiced expression I'd perfected over 2 years of this routine. "Don't be silly. You need your strength, and I need to study. We're helping each other." Her gray eyes, sharper than her frail body suggested, searched my face. "You know what I realized yesterday? You're more of a daughter to me than David ever was a son." The words hung in the air like a confession. "He calls twice a week if I'm lucky. You haven't left my side in months." The textbook slipped from my knee, landing with a soft thud that seemed to echo my exhaustion. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., reviewing medication interactions before my shift at the clinic, then rushing here to manage Mrs. Miller's afternoon routine. The living room couch had become my permanent bedroom. David claimed he needed proper rest for his residency whenever he graced us with his presence. "That's what family does," I said, retrieving my book and marking the page on cardiac medications. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was studying drugs to heal hearts while mine slowly broke from neglect. My phone buzzed with David's familiar pattern, 2 short texts that always meant the same thing: "Working late again. Don't wait up. Emergency surgery." Mrs. Miller noticed my expression shift. "Another emergency?" "You know how it is. Saving lives doesn't follow a schedule." But even as I spoke the words, something nagged at me. David's emergencies had become remarkably frequent, always coinciding with evenings when I'd mentioned wanting to spend time together. 3 nights this week alone. The front door burst open with David's signature dramatic flair. "Mom! Emma, I brought flowers!" Mrs. Miller's entire demeanor transformed, her frail frame somehow finding energy as her son strode into the room carrying an elaborate bouquet of white roses. He looked every inch the successful medical resident, crisp white coat draped over his shoulder, stethoscope artfully positioned, dark hair perfectly styled despite allegedly working 14-hour shifts. "David, darling," Mrs. Miller's voice strengthened, years of maternal pride overriding her physical limitations. "Tell me about your day. Did you save anyone?" I watched from my corner, invisible as furniture, while David regaled her with heroic tales of cardiac procedures and grateful patients. His hands gestured animatedly as he described a particularly challenging surgery, never once acknowledging that I'd been managing his mother's actual medical needs while he performed his theatrical rounds. "The attending said my technique was flawless," David continued, settling into the comfortable chair I'd vacated for him. "Dr. Sterling even mentioned me for the chief resident track." Mrs. Miller beamed with the kind of pure joy I hadn't seen from her in weeks. This was the David she remembered, the brilliant son destined for greatness, not the absent figure who left his girlfriend to handle the messy reality of elder care. I slipped into the kitchen under the pretense of preparing dinner, but really to escape the performance. While chopping vegetables, I could hear David's voice carrying through the thin walls, spinning tales of medical heroics while I planned medication schedules and worried about Mrs. Miller's physical therapy compliance. Later, while hanging David's work clothes in the closet, my fingers encountered something unexpected in his jacket pocket. A collection of receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. Chez Laurent, the Sterling Room, Midnight Combin. Each bill showed amounts that made me physically wince, dated throughout the past month during times David had texted about being stuck at the hospital. My nursing training kicked in automatically. Document everything, question discrepancies, verify information. These weren't the receipts of someone grabbing cafeteria food between surgeries. These were elaborate dinners for 2, wine pairings, dessert courses that cost more than I made in a week at the clinic. "Maybe work dinners?" I whispered to myself, already knowing how hollow that sounded. David complained constantly about his residence salary, how we needed to tighten our belts, while I worked extra shifts to cover household expenses. The rational part of my brain offered explanations: networking events, attending physicians treating residents, department celebrations. But my hands shook as I photographed each receipt with my phone, a habit from Nurit Singh school where documentation meant everything. 3 days later, while doing David's laundry, I found his backup medical bag buried under dirty scrubs. The familiar weight felt wrong as I lifted it, something rattling inside that didn't belong with stethoscopes and prescription pads. A second phone. Not his usual device with the cracked screen and medical apps, but a sleek black phone I'd never seen before. The screen lit up as I moved it, revealing a message notification that made my blood freeze. V. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Saturday can't come fast enough. Love you, baby. My fingers moved without conscious thought, unlocking the phone with the same passcode David used for everything. His mother's birthday, a detail that now felt like cruel irony. The message thread revealed a relationship spanning months, intimate conversations with someone named Victoria Sterling. David. Almost done with this charade. Mom's condition is getting worse anyway. Once she's gone, we can stop sneaking around. Victoria. Poor thing. At least Emma's taking good care of her. Saves you from having to deal with all that medical stuff. David. Emma's useful for now. Free nursing care and emotional support. But she has no idea what's coming. Once I inherit the house, we can start our real life together. Victoria. Won't she be devastated when you leave her? David. She'll survive. Emma's the type who'll always find someone to take care of. It's what she does. My hands moved with clinical precision, photographing every message, every photo they'd shared, every casual reference to their future plans that involved erasing me completely. The nursing student in me had learned to document methodically, to gather evidence before drawing conclusions. But this evidence painted a picture so devastating that my carefully constructed world tilted off its axis. David wasn't just cheating. He was strategically using me as unpaid elder care while courting his real future, a woman whose last name I now recognized from the hospital directory. Victoria Sterling, daughter of the hospital director. The final message thread showed photos from last Saturday, David and Victoria at an upscale restaurant, his arm around a stunning blonde while he smiled wider than I'd seen in months. The timestamp matched exactly with his text to me about an emergency surgery that would keep him at the hospital all night. I set the phone down carefully, my nursing training taking over completely. Document, verify, plan. The same methodical approach that had carried me through 2 years of medical education now focused on a different kind of diagnosis. David wasn't just unfaithful, he was calculating. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a gradual drift apart. This was a deliberate long-term strategy, using my devotion as a resource while he built his real future with someone else. But as I photographed the final messages, something shifted inside me. The exhausted, devoted girlfriend who'd been slowly disappearing into caregiving responsibilities was someone I barely recognized anymore. In her place stood someone David had never bothered to really know, a nursing student trained in critical thinking, patient advocacy, and systematic problem-solving. Someone who documented everything. Someone who understood that the best medical interventions required careful planning, precise timing, and complete information before taking action. David thought he was using me. But looking at the evidence in my hands, I realized he'd actually been training me. The medical records request took exactly 3 business days to process, long enough for David to return from another emergency surgery with expensive cologne lingering on his collar, and short enough for my suspicions to crystallize into cold, documented fact. Mrs. Miller's actual medical files painted a picture drastically different from the one David had been selling to insurance companies. Her arthritis was manageable with proper medication and physical therapy. Her depression responded well to social engagement and structured activity. The declining cognitive function David had reported existed only in his fraudulent claims, claims that had justified increased insurance payouts for intensive home care. I spread the documents across my small desk in the corner of Mrs. Miller's living room, cross-referencing medical codes with insurance disbursements. My pharmacology textbook lay forgotten as I traced a pattern of systematic deception spanning 18 months. Exaggerated symptom severity, I whispered, highlighting discrepancies between actual doctor's notes and insurance submissions. Inflated care requirements, falsified therapy compliance reports. The money trail led to a checking account I'd never seen before, David's emergency medical fund, that received insurance payouts but somehow never funded his mother's care. Instead, those payments had been financing his elaborate courtship of Victoria Sterling, while I worked double shifts at the clinic to cover actual household expenses. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Rachel Thompson's name appeared on the screen, a contact I'd saved months ago but never called back. "Emma, I know this is awkward, but I had to try reaching you again." Rachel's voice carried a nervous urgency. "I've been seeing David's name in the hospital newsletter and I couldn't stay quiet anymore." "What about David?" "He did this before, with my grandmother." The words tumbled out in a rush. 3 years ago, when we were dating in college, he volunteered to help care for my grandmother after her stroke, made himself indispensable to my family. Meanwhile, he was sleeping with his study partner. I sank into my chair, the medical records suddenly taking on a new dimension. How long did it go on? 8 months. He had me convinced he was this devoted, caring boyfriend who loved my family, used my grandmother's social security to pay for dates with the other girl. When my grandmother died, he disappeared within a week. The pattern clicked into place with horrifying clarity. David hadn't chosen me for my personality or our connection. He'd identified me as someone with medical training, family caregiving experience, and the kind of selfless nature that made me perfect for long-term exploitation. "Rachel, I need to ask you something specific. Did you ever find evidence of insurance fraud?" Silence stretched across the line. "How did you know?" "Because he's doing it again." After hanging up with Rachel, I began implementing changes to Mrs. Miller's care routine, so gradually she barely noticed. Proper medication timing instead of David's haphazard schedule, gentle exercises disguised as household activities, nutritious meals that addressed her specific health needs rather than whatever was easiest to prepare. Within 2 weeks, Mrs. Miller was sitting up for longer periods. Her conversation became sharper, more engaged. She began asking pointed questions about David's absence that I deflected with increasing difficulty. "He seems different lately," she observed during our afternoon routine. "Distracted, like his mind is somewhere else entirely." I was measuring her blood pressure when she made this observation, and I watched the numbers spike slightly with her emotional stress. Even she could sense David's psychological absence, though she couldn't name its cause. That evening, I positioned myself in the kitchen with my laptop, ostensibly studying for upcoming exams, but actually recording David's phone conversation in the next room. He thought I couldn't hear him through the thin walls, but nursing school had taught me to pay attention to details others missed. "The situation is getting complicated, Victoria. Mom's actually getting better instead of worse, and Emma's becoming suspicious about the money." I froze, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. "No, she doesn't know about us yet, but she's asking too many questions about my schedule, and Mom keeps talking about updating her will to include Emma, which would complicate everything." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, David casually discussing his mother's inconvenient recovery and his frustration that his inheritance timeline was being disrupted by actual medical improvement. He spoke about Mrs. Miller like a stock portfolio underperforming expectations. But it was his casual dismissal of me that cut deepest. "Emma will always find someone to take care of. It's her nature. She'll be fine once I move on." The recording ended with David scheduling another emergency surgery for Saturday. The same night Victoria had mentioned in their text thread about a charity gala at the country club. I saved the audio file with the same methodical precision I used for patient documentation, labeling it with date, time, and key content points. Then I opened my laptop and began researching Victoria Sterling more thoroughly. What I found made my stomach churn. Photos from society events showing David and Victoria together at functions spanning the past 6 months. Professional headshots identifying her as Events Coordinator, Sterling Memorial Foundation. LinkedIn connections linking her to every prominent medical family in the city. David hadn't just been cheating, he'd been strategically positioning himself within the medical establishment's social hierarchy, using Victoria as his entry point to a world where his residency salary would never gain him access. 3 days later, Rachel introduced me to Sophia Chen through a carefully orchestrated coffee meeting that felt more like a strategic briefing. Sophia arrived with a tablet full of research and an expression that suggested she'd been investigating David for weeks. Rachel filled me in on the basics, Sophia said, sliding into the booth across from me. But I've been digging deeper. David Miller is a pattern predator. This isn't just cheating. It's systematic exploitation with a specific victim profile. She showed me a spreadsheet documenting David's dating history going back to high school. Every serious girlfriend had possessed either medical training, caregiving experience, or family members requiring long-term care. Every relationship had ended abruptly after the care situation resolved. He's not just using you for elder care, Sophia continued. He's been mining your nursing knowledge for his residency research. Those detailed patient observations you've been making about his mother's care, he's been presenting them as his own clinical insights to attending physicians. The evidence was overwhelming. David had plagiarized my documentation to enhance his medical reputation, while simultaneously defrauding insurance companies and emotionally manipulating his mother. He'd turned caregiving into a profit center while positioning himself for a more advantageous relationship. But as I reviewed Sophia's research, I realized something David had fatally underestimated. His pattern of exploitation had created a network of women who understood exactly how he operated. Rachel's grandmother case had established legal precedents. Sophia's investigation had documented his methods. My nursing background had given me access to medical and financial records he'd never expected me to review. We have enough evidence to destroy his medical career, Sophia said quietly. The question is whether you want to pursue it. I looked at both women, thinking about Mrs. Miller upstairs, finally sleeping peacefully after months of proper care, thinking about David's casual dismissal of everyone who'd ever loved him, thinking about future victims who might not have the resources or knowledge to protect themselves. I want to pursue it, I said. But Mrs. Miller comes first. Whatever we do, she can't be collateral damage in his destruction. Sophia nodded, making notes on her tablet. Then we do this surgically, document everything, build an airtight case, and ensure she's protected before we move. As I walked home that evening, I realized David's greatest mistake hadn't been underestimating my intelligence or my investigative capabilities. His greatest mistake had been assuming that kindness equaled weakness, that caregiving meant passivity. He'd spent 2 years training me to be thorough, methodical, and strategic in I-call situations. Now I was applying those same skills to a different kind of diagnosis, one where he was both the disease and the cure. The expensive restaurant receipt from Chez Laurent lay casually beside Mrs. Miller's morning medication tray, positioned where the morning light would catch the embossed gold lettering. I watched from the doorway as her fingers traced the date, last Tuesday when David had texted about pulling a double shift in the cardiac unit. $247, she murmured, adjusting her reading glasses. For a work dinner? I entered with her breakfast, feigning surprise at finding the receipt. Oh, that must have fallen out of David's jacket when I was doing laundry. Should I put it somewhere safe? Mrs. Miller's gray eyes met mine with a sharpness I hadn't seen in months. Emma dear, how many work dinners require champagne pairings? The question hung between us like a diagnosis neither of us wanted to voice. I'd been leaving carefully selected evidence for 3 weeks now, screenshots of hospital charity galas David had attended while claiming to be in surgery, credit card statements showing purchases at jewelry stores during his emergency calls, social media photos where he appeared relaxed and well-dressed while supposedly saving lives. "He works very hard," I said, the response automatic after 2 years of making excuses for him. "He does something very hard," Mrs. Miller corrected, folding the receipt with deliberate precision. "The question is whether it's actually work." Her medication routine had become our daily opportunity for these subtle revelations. As I organized her pills, properly timed doses that David had been neglecting, she would ask increasingly pointed questions about his absence. When did his shifts become so frequent? Why did he never call to check on her recovery? How could someone studying cardiology be so indifferent to his own mother's improving heart health? The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when David made the fatal mistake of taking a personal call while he thought Mrs. Miller was napping. I was in the kitchen preparing her physical therapy exercises when his voice carried through the thin walls with perfect clarity. "Victoria, the situation is becoming problematic. Mom's recovery is taking longer than expected, which delays everything we discussed." I froze, my hands stilling on the resistance bands. Mrs. Miller's bedroom door was cracked open, her form motionless beneath the quilted blanket. "The inheritance timeline needs to accelerate. I've already put deposits down on the venue, and your father expects a formal announcement soon." David's voice carried the casual callousness of someone discussing stock portfolios rather than his mother's life. "Emma's becoming suspicious too. She keeps asking about my schedule discrepancies." Through the crack in the door, I could see Mrs. Miller's reflection in her vanity mirror. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on David's pacing form with laser focus. "No, she doesn't know about us yet, though she's smarter than I initially calculated. But once Mom's situation resolves, Emma will be yesterday's problem. She'll find someone else to care for. It's her pathological need to be needed." The conversation continued for 15 minutes, David detailing his frustration with his mother's inconvenient medical improvement and his plans to liquidate her assets for his wedding with Victoria Sterling. He discussed Mrs. Miller like she was already dead, a bureaucratic obstacle preventing him from accessing his rightful inheritance. When David finally left for his evening shift, Mrs. Miller called my name with a voice that carried decades of accumulated wisdom and fresh betrayal. "Emma, we need to talk." I found her sitting upright in bed, more alert and authoritative than I'd seen her since before her husband's death. The frail, dependent woman David dismissed had been replaced by someone formidable, a mother who'd finally heard her son's true character in his own words. "How long have you known?" she asked, her fingers drumming against the quilted comforter with nervous energy. "Known what?" "About David, about his lies, about whatever he's been doing while pretending to care for me." The directness of her question shattered my careful pretense. "Mrs. Miller, I've been suspicious for months," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength with each word. "A mother knows when her child is lying, Emma. I've been watching, listening, waiting for confirmation of what I hoped wasn't true." She gestured toward her nightstand, where I noticed a small digital recorder partially hidden beneath her medication organizer. "I've been documenting his phone calls for weeks, every conversation about my condition, every discussion of his plans that don't include my actual survival." My careful strategy of protecting her from the harshest truths crumbled as I realized she'd been conducting her own investigation parallel to mine. Mrs. Miller wasn't the naive victim I'd been shielding. She was a strategic thinker who'd been gathering evidence while pretending to be oblivious. "Show me what you found," she commanded, her tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I retrieved my laptop and carefully selected evidence to share. The insurance fraud documentation, the financial theft, the medical misrepresentations. I showed her David's systematic exploitation while omitting the cruelest details about his wishes for her death. Mrs. Miller reviewed each document with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent 40 years managing a household budget and medical bills. Her fingers traced the financial discrepancies, her eyes narrowing at the falsified medical reports. "He's been stealing from me while using you as unpaid labor," she summarized, her voice steady despite the magnitude of betrayal. "How much money are we talking about?" "Approximately $18,000 over the past 18 months. She absorbed this information with remarkable composure, then reached for her purse with more energy than I'd seen her display in weeks. "Emma, I need you to drive me somewhere tomorrow morning." "Where?" "To see my attorney. If my son wants to treat me like I'm already dead, perhaps it's time I start making decisions like I'm very much alive." The transformation in Mrs. Miller was startling. The woman who'd spent months apologizing for being a burden suddenly began issuing instructions with crisp efficiency. She wanted copies of all financial documents, contact information for the insurance fraud investigators, and detailed medical records proving her actual condition versus David's reported claims. "He underestimated both of us," she said, organizing the evidence into neat piles. "David sees what he wants to see, a dying mother and a devoted caregiver too naive to question his stories. He never considered that women his age might have survived decades by being considerably smarter than men give us credit for." As we worked together organizing the documentation, Mrs. Miller revealed the depth of her strategic thinking. She'd been mentally cataloging David's lies for months, cross-referencing his claimed hospital schedules with actual visiting patterns, noting the correlation between his emergencies and her own health improvements. "The irony is exquisite," she observed, reviewing David's plagiarized research notes. "He's been stealing your nursing observations to advance his medical career, while simultaneously defrauding insurance companies and emotionally abandoning the patient those observations were meant to help." Her analysis was surgical in its precision. David hadn't just betrayed individual relationships, he'd violated every principle of medical ethics while exploiting the very caregiving system designed to protect vulnerable patients. The next morning, Mrs. Miller emerged from her bedroom wearing her best dress, navy blue with pearl buttons, and carrying a leather handbag I hadn't seen since her husband's funeral. She'd applied makeup with steady hands and styled her silver hair with care that spoke of renewed purpose. "Are you ready?" I asked, surprised by her transformation. "Emma, I've been ready for this conversation for 40 years, she replied, her voice carrying steel I'd never heard before. "It's taken me this long to gather enough evidence to prove what I've always suspected about my son's character." As we prepared to leave for the attorney's office, Mrs. Miller paused at her bedroom door, looking back at the recorder still positioned by her medications. "There's something else you should know," she said, her expression mixing satisfaction with maternal disappointment. "David called Victoria again this morning, discussing their engagement timeline. He's planning to propose next week, assuming my situation resolves itself conveniently." She smiled with the kind of maternal authority that had raised children and managed households through decades of challenges. "I think it's time to introduce some inconvenience into his timeline." Sophia's laptop screen displayed a digital war room, spreadsheets cascading across multiple monitors, each tab representing a different avenue of David's destruction. The coffee shop's corner booth had become our command center, where 3 women systematically dismantled a man's carefully constructed lies with the precision of surgeons. "Financial records confirm 18 months of systematic fraud," Sophia announced, highlighting entries in her comprehensive timeline. "Medical documentation proves intentional misrepresentation of patient condition. Recorded conversations establish premeditated exploitation of multiple victims." She'd transformed my scattered evidence into a prosecution-ready case file, complete with cross-referenced dates, verified sources, and legal precedent citations. Rachel contributed psychological profiles from David's previous victims, while I provided medical expertise that proved his insurance claims were not just exaggerated but medically impossible. "Phase 1 launches today," Rachel said, positioning her phone to record her first TikTok video. "I'm calling it Caregiver Red Flags, and starting with general patterns before getting specific." Her content strategy was brilliant. Begin with educational posts about elder care exploitation, gradually introduce David's specific behaviors without naming him, then allow her audience to piece together the patterns themselves. By the time she revealed his identity, her followers would already be emotionally invested in seeing justice served. The first video focuses on medical manipulation, Rachel explained, adjusting her ring light. How predators use healthcare complexity to exploit caregivers who don't have medical training. I watched her record 6 videos in quick succession, each one highlighting different aspects of David's methodology. Her social media expertise transformed our evidence into digestible content that educated viewers while building momentum for David's exposure. Meanwhile, Sophia had identified David's professional vulnerabilities with devastating accuracy. His residency program has strict policies about research integrity and patient confidentiality. Anonymous tips about plagiarized observations will trigger automatic ethics investigations. She'd crafted multiple anonymous reports detailing David's theft of my nursing documentation, each report supported by timestamp evidence and direct quotes from his presentations to attending physicians. The complaints would hit his program from different angles: research fraud, patient exploitation, insurance manipulation. Hospital Director Sterling receives his complaint Thursday morning, Sophia continued, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Information about insurance fraud involving staff family members goes directly to hospital compliance officers. The beauty of our coordinated attack lay in its leg. Idimacy. Every complaint was factually accurate, legally sound, and ethically justified. We weren't manufacturing scandals. We were simply ensuring David's actual behavior received appropriate scrutiny. My phone buzzed with David's increasingly frantic texts. His world was beginning to crack in ways he couldn't yet identify, but his desperation was already showing. David, Emma, people are asking weird questions about Mom's condition. Did you say something to someone? David, the residency program wants to review my research notes. This is probably routine, but I need you to confirm my timeline for Mom's care. David, call me immediately. Something's wrong, and I need you to fix it. His messages revealed a man accustomed to using me as his crisis management system, someone who'd always relied on my competence to solve problems he'd created. The entitlement in his tone was staggering. Even while betraying me, he expected my continued assistance in managing the consequences. He's panicking, I observed, showing the messages to Sophia and Rachel. Good, Rachel replied, not looking up from editing her latest video. Panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy people make mistakes. The first major crack appeared when Mrs. Miller received a formal call from insurance investigators. David's fraudulent claims had triggered a routine audit that escalated quickly once investigators compared his reports with actual medical records. Mrs. Miller, we need to clarify some discrepancies in your condition assessments, the investigator explained during a recorded phone conversation. Your physician's notes indicate significant improvement over the past 6 months, but insurance claims suggest deteriorating cognitive function and increased care requirements. Mrs. Miller's response was masterful. I'm happy to clarify any confusion. My son David has been handling my insurance communications, though I should mention that my actual care has been managed by my daughter-in-law Emma, who has medical training. She provided the investigator with my contact information while casually mentioning that David might have misunderstood her medical situation due to his demanding residency schedule. Her tone suggested innocent confusion rather than deliberate accusation, but the implication was devastating. Rachel's TikTok series exploded with unexpected virality. Her 4th video, When Your Caregiver Partner Has a Secret Life, gained 3 million views in 48 hours, with comments from women sharing similar experiences. The algorithmic boost pushed her content to medical professionals, elder care advocates, and social justice communities. OMG, this is literally my ex who used me to care for his sick dad while dating his coworker. Why do men think nursing skills equals free labor? Someone tag the hospital where this resident works because this needs consequences. The comments section became a support network for caregiver exploitation survivors, with women sharing strategies for recognition and escape. Rachel's educational content had sparked a movement that extended far beyond David's individual case. Meanwhile, Victoria Sterling was conducting her own investigation after receiving anonymous information about David's financial situation. Her father had taught her to verify romantic partners' claims before serious commitment, especially given their family's wealth and social position. "David, we need to discuss your family's financial situation," Victoria said during a conversation I recorded from Mrs. Miller's bedroom. "My father's attorney ran a routine background check for the prenuptial agreement, and there are some concerning discrepancies." David's voice carried forced confidence. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Your mother's estate appears to be in her control, not declining into your management as you suggested. Also, there are questions about insurance payments that don't align with actual medical expenses." The conversation that followed revealed David's desperation as he attempted to explain away evidence of fraud while maintaining his fiction about inheriting significant assets. Victoria's questions were precise, informed, and increasingly skeptical. "David, the engagement ring receipt shows you financed it against future inheritance from someone who's apparently recovering rather than declining. How exactly does that work?" His explanations became increasingly convoluted, each lie requiring additional lies to maintain consistency. Victoria's accounting background made her particularly suited to identify financial inconsistencies, and David's panic was audible through the phone. The climactic moment arrived when David's residency program formally suspended him pending their ethics investigation. The anonymous tips about research plagiarism had triggered a comprehensive review that revealed his systematic theft of my nursing observations. Effective immediately, David Miller is suspended from all clinical duties pending investigation into allegations of research misconduct and patient confidentiality violations, the formal notice read. Simultaneously, Victoria discovered that David had taken loans against his future inheritance, not just for her engagement ring, but for their entire relationship: dinner dates, weekend trips, the country club membership he'd used to court her. Every romantic gesture had been financed through fraud against his own mother. Her breakup text was brutal in its efficiency. "David, I've learned about your financial and professional situation. This relationship is over. Don't contact me again. All wedding-related deposits are your responsibility." She blocked him on every platform before he could respond. Her social media immediately scrubbed of any evidence they'd ever been together. Victoria Sterling had the resources and sophistication to disappear from David's life as efficiently as she'd entered it. That evening, my phone exploded with David's increasingly unhinged messages. His carefully constructed world was collapsing simultaneously across multiple fronts: professional disgrace, romantic abandonment, financial investigation, and family betrayal. "David, you did this to me. Fix it now." "David, I know you turned Mom against me somehow. Whatever lies you told her, take them back." "David, Emma, please. I can explain everything if you just give me a chance." The desperation in his final message revealed a man who'd never imagined consequences for his actions, someone who'd always relied on other people's labor and loyalty to solve problems he'd created. As I showed his messages to Mrs. Miller, now sitting upright in her favorite chair wearing her pearl necklace like armor, she smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd finally seen justice served. "Emma, I believe it's time for the final conversation." The front door exploded inward with the force of David's rage, his key scraping against the lock as he burst into the living room where Mrs. Miller and I sat reviewing legal documents. His appearance was catastrophic. Wrinkled scrubs, unwashed hair, wild eyes that darted between us like a cornered animal assessing threats. "What the hell did you do to me?" he snarled, his voice cracking with desperation and fury. "My residency, Victoria, the insurance investigation, you orchestrated all of this." I remained seated beside Mrs. Miller, who had positioned herself in her favorite armchair like a queen holding court. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so completely that David's dramatic entrance felt almost theatrical, a former king raging at subjects who no longer recognized his authority. "David, you need to calm down," I said evenly, my nursing training automatically assessing his psychological state. "You're experiencing the consequences of your own choices." "My choices?" His laugh was sharp, bitter. "You turned my own mother against me. You poisoned her mind with lies and jealousy because you couldn't handle that I found someone better." Mrs. Miller's voice cut through his tirade with surgical precision. "David, sit down. We're going to have the conversation I should have initiated years ago." Something in her tone, authoritative, final, made David stop mid-gesture. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to hide behind her skirts, seeking comfort from a mother who'd always protected him from consequences. "Mom, whatever Emma told you." "Emma didn't tell me anything I hadn't already observed," Mrs. Miller interrupted, her hands folded with deliberate calm. "I've been recording your phone conversations for weeks, David. Every word about my inconvenient recovery, your excitement about inheriting my assets, your plans to abandon the woman who's been caring for me while you courted Victoria Sterling." David's face drained of color as the reality hit him. His mother, the weak, dependent victim he'd dismissed, had been conducting surveillance operations that would make intelligence agencies proud. "You've been lying to insurance companies about my medical condition while stealing the money meant for my care," she continued, her voice gaining strength with each accusation. "You've been plagiarizing Emma's nursing observations for your research while treating her like unpaid labor. You've been planning my funeral while I recovered from illnesses you were too selfish to properly address." The formal charges had been filed that morning. David's residency program had officially terminated his position following their ethics investigation, the insurer. Anne's fraud case had been referred to criminal prosecutors. Victoria had blocked him on every platform after discovering his financial deception. 26 years old, and you still think your mother is too stupid to recognize when her son is lying to her, Mrs. Miller said, her disappointment more devastating than anger. "Did you really believe I wouldn't notice that Emma was providing better medical care than my own doctor's son?" David's composure cracked completely. "You can't disinherit me. I'm your son. Everything you have belongs to me by right." "Actually, David, everything I have belongs to me until I die," Mrs. Miller corrected, producing a manila folder from beside her chair. "Which, thanks to Emma's excellent care, won't be happening according to your timeline." The updated will had been executed 3 days prior, witnessed by her attorney and a notary public. Mrs. Miller had left David a symbolic $1, preventing him from claiming he'd been accidentally overlooked. Everything else, the house, investments, insurance policies, transferred to Emma, with detailed documentation explaining the reasoning. "This is alienation of affection," David screamed, spinning toward me with accusation blazing in his eyes. "You manipulated a sick old woman against her own family. I'll contest this will, sue you for fraud, expose your lies." His threats revealed the depth of his entitlement. Even facing criminal charges and professional disgrace, he expected the legal system to restore his privileges and punish the women who dared to document his behavior. "Contest away," I replied, standing to match his aggressive posture. "We have 2 years of documentation proving your systematic abuse, fraud, and abandonment. Every court filing will become public record, David. Every detail of your insurance fraud, research plagiarism, and emotional manipulation will be preserved in legal documents." The insurance investigation had concluded with devastating efficiency. David's fraudulent claims totaling $23,000 required full restitution, plus penalties and legal fees. His cooperation with investigators had prevented criminal prosecution, but the financial burden would follow him for years. The medical board's response was even more severe. Research fraud and patient exploitation violations resulted in permanent license revocation. David would never practice medicine in any capacity, his decade of education and training rendered worthless by his own ethical failures. You destroyed my entire life over what? Jealousy? Revenge? He asked, his voice breaking with self-pity that felt obscene given his victim's suffering. We didn't destroy anything, Mrs. Miller said, rising from her chair with newfound strength. We simply stopped enabling your destruction of everyone else. Emma documented your behavior. Rachel shared her similar experience. Sophia organized the evidence. I protected my assets from theft. Victoria made an informed decision about your character. Her analysis was clinical, precise. David's downfall hadn't required elaborate schemes or manufactured evidence. It had simply required his victims to stop protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. The legal resolution unfolded. At over 6 months, with bureaucratic inevitability, David accepted a plea agreement requiring full restitution, 2 years probation, and community service in elder care facilities, a particularly fitting irony that he'd be forced to provide the kind of care he'd always delegated to others. His medical career was permanently finished, his social standing destroyed, his financial future mortgaged to pay for his crimes. The prestigious residency that had justified his exploitation was replaced by retail work and the social isolation that comes with public disgrace. Meanwhile, Emma faced her own crucial decision. The inheritance Mrs. Miller had left her was substantial, enough to disappear completely, start fresh somewhere David could never find her, build a new life free from all reminders of her exploitation. I could take the money and leave, I told Mrs. Miller during one of our afternoon conversations. Start over somewhere else, pretend none of this ever happened. Mrs. Miller's expression was understanding but hopeful. You could. But would that honor what we've built together? This isn't about David anymore, Emma. This is about the family we've chosen to become. Her words crystallized my realization. The inheritance wasn't payment for services rendered. It was recognition of the genuine love and care we'd developed. Running away would dishonor both our suffering and our growth. I'm staying, I decided, not because I have to, but because I want to, because this is home now. The ripple effects of our story extended far beyond personal justice. Sophia had documented our entire journey on her platform, creating a comprehensive case study in recognizing and escaping caregiver exploitation. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of women sharing similar experiences, requesting advice, organizing support networks. We're calling it the Caregivers Union, Sophia explained during our 6-month anniversary celebration. Legal resources, emotional support, financial assistance for people escaping exploitative situations. Emma's story gave us the framework to help others. Rachel's TikTok series had evolved into a full-time advocacy platform with speaking engagements at nursing schools and elder care conferences. Her personal experience with David's pattern had become educational content that reached millions of caregivers worldwide. The final moment of symbolic justice came during my nursing school graduation ceremony. Mrs. Miller sat in the front row, wearing her best dress and pearl necklace, beaming with pride as I received my degree summa cum laude. The weak, dependent woman David had dismissed was now vibrant, engaged, and actively advocating for caregiver rights. Across town, David was starting his evening shift at a big-box electronics store, his manager 22 years old with a community college degree. The brilliant medical resident who'd once saved lives now explained warranty policies to customers who didn't recognize his former prestige. Poetic justice, Mrs. Miller observed as we celebrated at dinner afterward. He wanted to treat people like they were disposable. Now he discovers what it feels like to be dispensable himself. The complete reversal of our positions was staggering. Emma had risen from unpaid caregiver to nursing graduate with promising career prospects. Mrs. Miller had transformed from abandoned patient to elder care advocate. David had fallen from future doctor to retail worker facing years of financial and social consequences. But the deepest satisfaction came from understanding that we hadn't needed to destroy David. We'd simply needed to stop enabling his destruction of others. The name placard reading Emma Clark, RN, gleamed on my desk at Metropolitan General Hospital, positioned next to a framed photo of Mrs. Miller and me at my graduation ceremony. 6 months into my nursing career, I'd already been recognized for patient advocacy excellence and invited to join the hospital's ethics committee, recognition that felt surreal after years of having my expertise dismissed and undervalued. "Emma, we have a situation in room 312, Dr. Marcus Webb said, appearing at my workstation with the kind of respectful collaboration I'd never experienced with David. Elderly patient with family dynamics that seem familiar. Marcus had been the ethical resident who'd helped expose David's research fraud, and our professional relationship had gradually evolved into something deeper. Unlike David's patronizing dismissal of my medical knowledge, Marcus actively sought my insights on patient care, respecting my nursing expertise as essential rather than supplementary. Room 312 housed an 80-year-old woman whose son was pressuring staff to increase pain medication for her comfort, while simultaneously discussing her declining condition with insurance representatives. The pattern was immediately recognizable: medical manipulation designed to expedite inheritance while appearing compassionate. Classic caregiver exploitation setup, I diagnosed, reviewing the patient's actual medical records. She's responding well to treatment, but her son is creating artificial urgency around end-of-life decisions. My experience with David had given me specialized expertise in recognizing elder care fraud. The hospital had begun consulting me on similar cases, my first-hand knowledge helping protect vulnerable patients from family members who viewed them as financial opportunities rather than human beings. Mrs. Miller's transformation was even more remarkable than my professional success. The frail, dependent woman David had abandoned was now leading monthly meetings of the Metro Caregivers Support Network, a group that had expanded from 12 members to over 200 in just 8 months. "Today we're discussing financial red flags," Mrs. Miller announced from the community center podium, her voice strong and authoritative. "When family members start managing your medical communications without your knowledge, that's not help. That's control." Her advocacy work had attracted attention from elder care organizations statewide. The woman who'd once apologized for being a burden was now testifying before legislative committees about caregiver exploitation, her personal experience lending credibility to policy recommendations. The legal adoption papers had been finalized on my birthday, a symbolic gesture that formalized what we'd both known for months. Mrs. Miller was the mother I'd never had, and I was the daughter she'd always deserved. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation or exploitation. "I never thought I'd say this," Mrs. Miller confided during our weekly dinner together, "but David's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to both of us. It forced us to discover our own strength." Her perspective reframed our entire experience. What had felt like victimization was actually liberation, freedom from relationships that diminished us, opportunity to build connections that honored our worth. The Caregivers Union had exceeded even Sophia's ambitious expectations. What began as support for individual exploitation victims had evolved into a national network providing legal resources, financial assistance, and advocacy training for caregivers trapped in exploitative situations. "We've helped over 3,000 people escape similar situations," Sophia reported during our quarterly board meeting. "The economic impact alone is staggering. Caregivers who were providing unpaid labor worth an estimated $47 million annually." Rachel's platform had become a comprehensive educational resource, with partnerships from nursing schools, legal aid societies, and elder care advocacy groups. Her personal story with David had sparked a movement that extended far beyond individual revenge into systemic change. My role in the organization focused on medical education, teaching other caregivers to recognize when their expertise was being exploited and their patients' conditions were being misrepresented. The knowledge I'd gained from David's fraud was now protecting countless families from similar manipulation. The pattern is always the same, I explained during a training session for social workers. Medical complexity is used as a weapon to silence caregivers who don't have professional training. They're told they couldn't possibly understand their loved one's condition, when actually their intimate knowledge makes them the best advocates. Meanwhile, David's consequences had become permanent rather than temporary setbacks. 18 months after his professional destruction, he was still working retail, still paying restitution, still facing the social isolation that comes with public disgrace in medical communities. His attempts to rebuild had been systematically thwarted by his own documented behavior. Job applications required background checks that revealed his fraud convictions. Dating profiles were recognized by women who'd heard his story through various platforms. Professional references from his former residency program were non-existent. He applied for a position at the medical supply company where I work, one of Mrs. Miller's support group members reported. Human Resources found his story online within hours of receiving his resume. David had discovered that reputation destruction in the digital age was effectively permanent. His name was forever linked to caregiver exploitation, insurance fraud, and research misconduct, a cautionary tale that would follow him indefinitely. But the most profound change was in my relationship with caregiving itself. The experience with David had taught me the crucial difference between caring for others and caring for myself, between service that honors dignity and service that enables exploitation. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness, I told a group of nursing students during a guest lecture. It's self-destruction disguised as virtue. Real compassion requires protecting both your patients and yourself from people who would exploit caring relationships. My mentorship focused on teaching future nurses to recognize their worth, set appropriate boundaries, and identify when their expertise was being appropriated or dismissed. The lessons I'd learned through manipulation were now protecting others from similar exploitation. Marcus and I had begun discussing marriage, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than convenient exploitation. He valued my intelligence, sought my professional opinions, and supported my advocacy work without expecting anything in return except partnership. "You know what I love most about you," he said during a quiet evening together. "You care deeply enough to fight for what's right, but you're smart enough to fight strategically rather than emotionally." His observation captured the transformation I'd undergone. The naive, self-sacrificing woman who'd enabled David's exploitation had been replaced by someone who channeled caring into effective action, who understood that the highest form of love sometimes requires the hardest conversations. The final validation came during a medical ethics conference where I'd been invited to present on caregiver exploitation patterns. As I concluded my presentation to an audience of doctors, nurses, and social workers, a young resident approached with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've been caring for my boyfriend's sick father while he pursues his fellowship, and I recognized every pattern you described. I thought I was going crazy, but you helped me understand what was really happening." This was why the pain had been worth it. Not for revenge against David, but for protection of future victims. Every woman who recognized exploitation patterns, every family member who demanded accountability, every caregiver who learned to value their worth was a victory that extended far beyond personal justice. As I drove home that evening, I realized the most satisfying aspect of my transformation wasn't David's downfall, but my own rise. I'd built a career that honored my intelligence, relationships that respected my worth, and a platform that protected others from the exploitation I'd escaped. Mrs. Miller was waiting with dinner prepared, eager to hear about my presentation. At 73, she was healthier, happier, and more engaged than she'd been in years. Our chosen family was built on foundations that would last because they were constructed from mutual respect rather than convenient need. Some people mistake kindness for weakness, I reflected, looking at the life we'd built together. But the strongest thing you can do is learn when kindness serves others and when it's time to be kind to yourself. The greatest victory wasn't destroying David, it was learning to build something better from the ashes of his betrayal. What would you do if you discovered the person you loved was using your kindness against you? Has someone ever mistaken your caring nature for weakness? Drop a comment sharing your story. You might help someone else recognize their own worth. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we're diving deep into more empowering revenge stories that'll make you believe in justice again.